All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to vBrownBag. Tonight, we are going to get back to our roots and talk about some VMware stuff. We're going to get some of the latest updates on the VMware Cloud Foundation Lab Constructor, or VLC for short. Running it on your Prem. How can you run the entire VCF stack in your own home lab, or maybe you have a lab at work, whatever the case may be. VMware's done a great job of making that available to folks with the licenses that you can get through things like vMug or the vExpert program. But it can be a lot to set it up unless you have an automated procedure to do so. We've heard about it before on vBrownBag, but it's been a while. So let's hear the latest. Tonight, joining us are Ben and Heath from VMware. Welcome, guys. Appreciate you joining us tonight. I am Ken Nalbone. Before I hand it over to the guys tonight, though, I want to remind folks that you can join in on the conversation tonight. We have both the chat and the QA. I'm just going to ask folks to please use the Q&A for consistency's sake so that I don't miss something. If something comes in on chat and I'm watching QA or vice versa. Also, if you're watching live, though, and you like Twitter better, just use the hashtag vBrownBag. I'll be watching that tonight, and I will respond to any questions that come across that way and bring them up for the guys here, for Ben and Heath to answer along the way. If you are watching us from another country outside the US, did you know we have shows in multiple regions? You can see them listed here on the right-hand side. You can go to vbrownbag.com/brownbags to find the Zoom link to sign up for any of those other ones. If you're watching this live tonight, did you know we have a YouTube channel? If you don't, check it out. It's the only vBrownBag on YouTube. I think the URL is youtube.com/vBrownBag, but I could be wrong. But it's not hard to search, and vice versa. If you're watching this on YouTube, check us out live. We record weekly on Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. I have talked on long enough, though. I'm not the one you came to hear tonight. I think you want to hear from our two guests, so I'm going to hand it over to Ben and Heath. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, guys, and hand it over to you now.
All right, let me pick that share up. Thanks so much for having us. Okay, everybody see the presentation?
Yeah, looks good.
We do.
Excellent. Okay. So there aren't going to be a ton of slides. I might have a lot of slides in the deck, but we're not going to go through them all. So don't worry about that. We're going to talk a little bit about, what Cloud Foundation is. The expectation is that everybody's got a pretty good idea. It's been around for 5-6 years now, right? But the main thing we're going to talk about is this VMware Cloud Foundation Lab Constructor, or VLC, which is automation for getting VCF set up in a quick way, in a nested way, so that you don't have the requirements of $500,000 worth of hardware. We'll go in depth with that. I know one of the things that we wanted to do was we're actually going to kind of go step by step through a deployment, right? Show you the prereqs that you need and kind of how they're set up. And then we'll go ahead and we'll walk through the UI of VLC, and then we'll actually start a deployment. Now, I did it earlier today. It took 1 hour and 24 minutes, and I don't think we have that kind of time. So I also have some other labs set up, as well as Heath has a lab set up, so we can show you, things that you can do with Cloud Foundation once it is set up in your lab. It's not just something that you're going to set up and look at and go, "Ooh, isn't that pretty?" Right? There's functionality to it that you can use and learn from. So the main part is going to be a demo, but it's going to be a walkthrough on kind of the how and what to do afterwards. Then we'll talk about how you can go ahead and get the bits, and we've got a great community out there. We have our own kind of external Slack instance from VMware, where there's all kinds of folks that'll help, and it's been kind of quiet in there lately, so we need some new folks in there asking questions. So all right, with that, I'll cover really quickly Cloud Foundation. Cloud Foundation is our entire stack, right? Compute, or vSphere, ESXi, vCenter, as well as storage, vSAN, but we also support VMC over VMFS over FC. We support NFS and vVols as well for storage options. And then you also have networking and security with NSX. And That goes far beyond software-defined networking, right? With the security aspects of it, you have intrusion detection, you have intrusion prevention pieces, and you have, the ability to have user-based firewalls. All of these things actually work in nested as well, right? So if it's something that you haven't touched before, if you want to check out what this new HCI mesh thing is with vSAN, and figure out how maybe that could help you in your environment, this is a great way to do that. Not everybody has labs like I do, and I don't actually have full physical labs anywhere. Everything I have is nested, so it usually runs on one physical box. The other thing about VMware Cloud Foundation is we have a lot of our other applications and management pieces that plug into this, which makes VMware Cloud Foundation the perfect place for building solutions. So everything from the Tanzu Kubernetes services, right? If you're doing DevOps, you can use continuous integration, continuous development from the vRealize suite, coupled with the Kubernetes pieces. You can deploy standard VMs and applications. You can deploy multi-tier architecture on SDN so that you're not using up VLANs. You can secure things at the endpoint with the distributed firewall. So it is amazing the amount of things that you can do, and you're never going to run out of things to do in your lab with Cloud Foundation as the base of it. And so what the problem is that, like I said before, it's $500,000 worth of hardware just to, get it up and running and to the point where you could build those things on it in a physical infrastructure. Now, I'm not poo-pooing physical infrastructure at all, because we need that for the performance piece of it. Nested is just not going to perform as well as actual, scale out physical infrastructure with many disks, right, serving all the IO and high-speed switches, and the entire physical infrastructure is needed when you're deploying production applications. But that nested infrastructure is the one that'll give you the ability to try things without breaking, without burning a bunch of money, right on physical gear right away, so that you can have a plan to go forward with. So VCF by default, right, needs 4 vSAN ready nodes, just at a minimum. The management domain, which is a piece of it, requires those 4 nodes just for what we call bring up, or to kind of stand up the base operational piece. Then, as you build out workload domains, this slide is actually incorrect. We now have 2 node workload domains that you can create, or clusters. They have to be backed by NFS, so we don't support vSAN in the 2 node configuration yet. But you can see, so you need 6 hosts to run workloads, right, as well as a management, and have that separation. So what we've done, and I've talked a bunch about it already, is, right, we've nested all of these things. And to do that, I like to do it on one physical host, right? That physical host will then deploy the 4 nested hosts that we talked about for management. And it will deploy what's called Cloud Builder. Cloud Builder is the piece that configures those 4 nested hosts, and then will also lay down vCenter NSX Manager, as well as SDDC Manager, and configure the cluster, configure the switches, configure all the VM KNICs for traffic separation, for vSAN, vMotion, NSX, and stand up your SDDC. So you can see here that we also have 4 additional hosts over on the right, above the workload domains moniker. So we have the ability to expand in nested. We have something in VLC either on bring up, you can deploy additional nested hosts. I had one guy on our team decided to do 16, right? It took his server for a little ride, but it did get done. So you know, you can make it just about as big as you want, as long as you have the back end like physical horsepower to run those things. Or, you know, you can run this expansion pack is the feature with VLC, so that you can add additional hosts on, so you can build workload domains, so you can scale workload domains that you already have or clusters that you have in place. Right. So what exactly is VLC, right? It's a really big PowerShell script that I've been working on for a long time. Long story short, and it's not very big. There are a lot of configuration files, but those configuration files are kind of set up for an automated deployment in a very prescriptive way, because we also have a complete set of labs that, you know, have screenshots and manuals, and you can do everything from SDN to deploying applications automatically with vRealize automation. And because of the way we deploy this automatically, all those things match up, right? So that we can deliver that to you. However, there is an automated mode which deploys all the internal services you need, the DHCP, NTP, NFS, BGP, right? All of those things will be deployed and configured automatically, or you can do manual mode. There's, you know, there's this, I guess, dividing line with us IT folks. In the first place, we're kind of control freaks, right? We like to control everything and make sure that, you know, we can fix it really. At least that's how I feel. And then the other part is that we really like automation. We like things to kind of happen automatically for us. So this is kind of the in between of those two things, and that's why we have both automated and manual. So if you want to build your own router out and peer it with BGP and have your own DNS, your own DHCP server, you can totally do that. I've had plenty of customers, partners that do that because they feel it's going to be closer to their environment, so that when they are testing these things, right, the functions that they're going to be doing in production, it's really close and it's isolated. So it can actually be very close to exact, right? Except for the actual running on physical hardware piece of it. We also have logging. This was fun for quite a while. I know at the beginning I told you it took me an hour and 24 minutes to deploy VCF today on my server. I was going to try to get it done during the call, but it's always fun to see people like post that log entry in the Slack channel, so you can see who's faster, who's not. And I'll tell you, the 64 core Threadrippers, really, they'll get it done in under an hour. It's kind of amazing, as long as they got a nice fast SSD paired with it. So that's an investment that might be worth it, but we haven't tried any new Intels in a while. All right, so real quickly, just so we know what we're looking at, because we're gonna very shortly kind of look at some labs in depth. And so we have this Windows jump host, right, over on the right in the purple. It's actually running 2019 in my lab. And then we have a NIC that's plugged into this VCF port group. And it's on a standard switch, a single physical hypervisor, ESXi 7.0.3, I think it is. Then when we start building, right, we'll build these layer 2 or nested hypervisors, and they will have their own distributed virtual switches, and they will have their own hypervisors will be there, but they'll look like VMs to us when we are logged into this physical layer. All right, we'll see that in just a second. And then if we log into the vCenter or one of the nested hosts, and I guess I should say, if we log into the nested vCenter or the nested SDDC manager that's running on top of the nested host, this is where Inception, right, kicks in. We'll be able to see those consuming resources from the nested hosts. All right. Oh, okay. So minimum required hardware. And this is like the bare minimum. If you go below this, all bets are off. And we'll talk a little bit about this, right? So 2 sockets, 12 cores. The things the vCenter that is deployed by default with bring up is 12 cores. Okay, so that is why that is the bare minimum. 128 gig of RAM of all the things that are deployed, like the NSX manager is 16 gig and it's reserved at first, so you need it to be at least that big. Then you have vCenter, which is another, I believe the vCenter is 16 gig, the SDDC manager is 16 gig. So, you know, and each one of the nested hosts on that layer 2, we typically, like, the default size is 64 gig of RAM. Now, you remember I said we need 4 of those hosts. That's 256 gigs of RAM. How can we run on 128 gig of RAM? Well, we can, right? Because of virtualization and over provisioning. Things, you know, once you fill that up, stuff starts paging out to disk, and things start getting bottlenecked and very slow. But we've tested it with 128 gig of RAM. You know, you can run the management domain and a couple of workloads inside of the management domain, which is called a consolidated deployment. So you can totally do that on this hardware. The other part is this SSD part. Now, when you deploy it, it's 636 gig of SSD that's taken up. So 800 gig is pretty much the bare minimum, because the other thing that happens is you have vSAN at that layer 2, and the default storage policy that's set there is RAID 1, which means mirrored. So all of your storage is actually doubled. So when it starts writing out log entries, or you start doing things with backups, maybe, right, all that space is doubled. So at 800 gig, you're going to run out of space pretty quick. You got about, if you do nothing with the environment, you probably have about a week of runtime before everything fails horribly, and, you know, stuff starts locking up and the nested hosts start dropping offline. And you'll know when there's a problem, I guess. That might be the plus. Now, I have some slides much later on, if we get to them, where I actually went and looked up some bare metal hosts and, you know, what those cost to rent, as well as I went out to eBay, so that we can see, right, like what this would cost. And for me, you know, when I look at a cost like that, it's the cost of an education for me, right? I run my own home lab stuff. I know Heath kind of got out of it because, you know, of various reasons. And there's people that say, well, you know, work should provide that for me. And so there's differing opinions, but we'll take a look at it if we have time. All right, so the prerequisites, here, you need at least one host, 128 gig of RAM. I'm actually gonna stop sharing this, and let's go share the lab. It's this one. It's big, it's blue, it's empty, right? You guys see the virtual desktop or the
Sure do, yeah.
cool. All right, so let's, since we're starting with the host, oops. I was going to take a picture of this host because it's down my basement. And, you know, when you see those pictures of like the world's worst wiring closets and stuff like that, that's kind of what my host looks like. And I live in Wisconsin. It's the beginning of winter. I just loaded a cord of wood down the basement next to the wood burner, which happens to be next to where the server is. And I had to move it. So it's kind of just propped up against the wall. It's not how you want to keep your hardware, but you know what? It still works and it'll, it's plugged into a UPS. So I got that going for it. All right. So here's our host. We can see that we got a bunch of VMs running on it already. So these right here is another instance of VCF that I've already deployed and I already have running. And you can see that we've got what, 7 servers here and then the cloud builder. So the 7 servers to me says, okay, I got 4 for management domain and I got another 3 for workload domain. And if we take a look at them, we can see they're 12 CPU by 96 gig each because I deployed the vRealize suite on here and, you know, we kind of got to pump up the amount of CPU as well as RAM for that to run properly. So I already built a jump host, right? Which is the vBrownBag jump, go figure. But we want to check out some of the prereqs here. So we'll go ahead and look. So we're plugged into the vBrownBag port group. All right. One of the first things that you're gonna have to do is set up a port group. Now, because this is a single host, I've actually set up an entire virtual switch for it, the vBrownBag switch. The benefit here, I have a host. This host has 64 cores and 512 gig of RAM. So cores, you know, is pretty big, but I usually end up running out of RAM with only 512 gig when I deploy a lot of multiple instances. So the settings that need to be changed when you create a new switch in here is you want the MTU to be 9,000. That's pretty much it inside of the standard switch. The other piece is, you see, I don't have any physical adapters. This is not connected to the physical wire. That means all the traffic stays within the host, right? So all the nested hosts or nested VMs have VMXNet 3s, which are equivalent to 10 gig NICs, right? So I can go 10 gig between all of the VMs because I'm on a single host and because I'm on a single switch, right? There's no wire, there's no other switch in the mix. So this is what I find works the fastest. And I realize that, you know, people have clusters that they've paid a lot of money for, you know, and that's their lab. And that's fine. Hopefully you have 10 gig switches connecting them because you're running nested vSAN on top of this. So if you have, you know, nested hosts on one physical host and then part of that same vSAN cluster that's nested, you got them on another physical host, the traffic has to go between those. And if you don't have got contention or anything like that, it can really affect your performance. All right, so on this switch, I've actually created a port group, and inside of the port group, we've set this to VLAN 4095, which equals trunk port group, is basically what it means. If this was a vCenter and we were deploying this to a distributed virtual switch, we could actually select the port group to say trunk port group. The other piece on the port group that you need to do, and the jury's still out on this. There is Mac Learning now on the newer ESXi. However, previous versions, which we still support, right? We have some people on 6.7 still, and I think one person on 6.5, which it's interesting that ESXi 7.0.x runs on those, and kind of cool. But so we need to be able to see all of the traffic from the nested hosts, and that's what promiscuous mode MAC address changes and forged transmits are. It's important that you set this on the port group. Inheriting it from the vSwitch doesn't work for reasons beyond passive understanding. All right, so you got your host set up. That's pretty much the only thing you need to do. If it's a single host, create a switch, create a port group, set the security on the port group to all except, and turn on trunking. Once that is done, you're going to want to set up your jump host. Because we're on the jump host already, there's a couple of things you need on the jump host. One is Power CLI. So that's pretty easy, right? Install -module space VMware.PowerCLI. And as long as you have internet connectivity, it'll go ahead and drag it down and install it for you. Then you also need the OVF tool. 4.4 plus. Jim, my director, told me the other day that now you've got to authenticate and to download it. So make sure that you have a customer connect account or something like that, so that you can get that. Power CLI doesn't require that. Then the other piece of it, because of the trunk group stuff that we did in the host, there are a couple of ways that you can do it, but the way that that is documented is to come in here and configure the advanced configuration setting for the VLAN ID, and you set this to 10. That way, this is the default management VLAN ID that comes with VLC, right? So if we look at the config file that we have, it says VLAN 10. That's where it's going to put all the nested hosts. That's where it's going to put vCenter, NSX Manager, SDDC Manager. So they all go on this VLAN, and this jump host needs to be able to speak with them. So this NIC is plugged into that vBrownBag port group. It's tagging all of its traffic with VLAN 10, so it will be able to do that. Okay, so what do we got? Power CLI, OVF tool. We've got our VLAN ID set. There are other things, although I haven't had as much of a problem with them during after server 2019 came out. And that's like the Windows Defender firewall and things like that. And actually all the firewalls, you want to make sure those things are all disabled, right? And then they have the one for the public firewall and the private firewall. And then if it's a domain controller, you got the domain firewall. You just want to make sure those are all off, at least during this deployment phase, because it can cause weird problems and make things very, very slow. It's a lab, it's okay. You can turn it back on after the deployment is done. But during the deployment, you want to shut those things off. And we are focusing on a single host that we are deploying to, that we're going to point VLC to. There are other considerations if you are pointing towards a cluster, if you're pointing towards a vSAN cluster, if you're pointing at a vCenter that has a single host. Those are all documented, but we're just taking the easy route here, and we're going with the single host. All right, so I believe we have everything set. There are a few other things you probably want, like Chrome is nice to have instead of Internet Explorer or Edge or right, whatever comes on here nowadays. And Putty, although again with Server 2019, I don't know if you folks know about it, but it actually comes with SSH in the command prompt now, which is kind of neat. And I think it even does s eh, thought it did SFTP, but you just do that with SSH anyways. All right. So you need to download really big download nowadays, Cloud Builder, right? So 4.5 was just GA'd last week. And it is coming in now at a whopping 23 gig. That is really big, but it does contain pretty much everything you need: ESXi, NSX, vCenter, SDDC Manager, right? It's all there. It's all in this single OVA. Where, I get, I don't know, concerned about it is you actually have to deploy this, right? And it takes anywhere from 16 to 20 minutes just to deploy this thing to, some pretty fast servers with enterprise level SSDs. Now I realize we need it, but I wish there was a way that we could trim this down, much less how long it takes you to download it. Now, the other piece that is not nearly as big is VLC, right? So VLC is something, it's a zip file. I'm actually going to publish this 4.5 version. I finished it up today. There's a couple people testing it yet. I'm just waiting for feedback, and it will probably go up on the VLC Slack for download shortly, right by the end of the week for sure. And I'll show you all the things for VLC Slack a little bit later. And that's that community that I'm talking about. So inside of here, you can see that we've got quite a few files. The one that you want to be concerned about first is this VCF Lab Constructor install guide. Or if you're running a Ryzen, you're going to want to read this one too. That was written by a community member. There's some NSX funniness, but if we take a look at the install guide, you can see there's a really extensive list of things that you have to do. Oh, you guys are the first ones to see the, all the new stuff, right? That comes out with this 4.5. And the last time that vBrownBag had an update was 4.0. So we've got a ton of stuff, a ton of new stuff that we can go through and is automated now. All right. Well, then let's look at it then. All right, so let's go ahead and open our VLC GUI. And GUI means it's actually got a UI. But if you caught that when I was looking at the install guide, one of the things that is coming out with 4.5 is headless mode. So once you create a configuration file with here, you can save it, and then you just run a command, right? You delete all the VMs, you run that command with passing it the parameter of the config file, and it'll go ahead and just deploy your environment. Okay, so the first screen that comes up here, you see we got some big buttons over on the left. So automated, this is the one that will build all the services and configure all the services for you, as well as, deploy Cloud Builder, deploy all the nested hosts, configure everything, stand it all up, and between an hour and 4 hours later, depending on what you select, you'll have a fully configured, stood up SDDC for about 5 minutes worth of work, right? So then there's the manual mode. This is the one where you guys and girls are the ones that are setting up your own services, and then you're going to plug those in to VLC here, right? Like you want your own VLANs, right? You want your own subnets. Those sort of things are what you would have to have configured in your environment prior to running this. And then expansion pack, that's the one we talked about where, hey, if you just want to stand up a whole bunch of ESXi hosts and you don't even want to use Cloud Foundation, this is the thing for you, right? You could download VLC just to use it for the expansion pack. You can build a config JSON file to build yourself as many hosts as you want, and it'll just spit them all out nested and put them on your physical infrastructure for you. And then you can, configure them to be whatever you want. I like automation more than that. So, having a bunch of hosts that don't get sucked into something that's going to configure them all for me doesn't excite me as much. But let's dive into the automated portion of it. So what this does is this public JSON file here that we have. Let's select one that has licenses in it. It will go ahead and populate everything that it can that's in that file. So if we take a look at the file, and there's a couple of different ways we can do it. Really? You can't open that type of file. Open with, how about Notepad? It's a JSON. You can do it. All right. So you can see in here, we've got IP addresses, usernames, passwords, network pools. Everything in here is configurable. If you want to fit your environment, you can come in, you can change this, and it will be, it'll be totally fine. You just need to make sure that everything that gets deployed is on that kind of same scheme, the same subnet. And the way to do that is to use the can't remember what it's called, the planner, the VMware Validated Solutions Planning Workbook is what it's called. And this will allow you to kind of lay everything out inside of an Excel spreadsheet. There's a smaller one if you're just doing a single, VCF deployment with the management domain. And that gets turned into this JSON that we're looking at here. So if you're not comfortable editing a JSON, there are Excel spreadsheets, that actually ship with Cloud Builder. The VVS one is available on core.vmware.com. And you can fill that out, and then you use a tool inside of Cloud Builder to produce the JSON. And then you can pass that JSON, your customized JSON, you can pass it right here into VLC, and it'll spit out your configuration and deploy and configure your configuration that you want. And you can use that either in automated mode or manual mode. Just remember, if it's manual mode, you got to build all this stuff yourself as far as services goes. Okay, so going through kind of step by step here, we can see that the main VLAN's filled in, the management network, the subnet that it's on, the management gateway and Cloud Builder are both the same, because Cloud Builder is the router in this case. Now, here's an external gateway and external DNS. So if you want Cloud Builder to be able to get out to the internet, and usually you do, because there's things like updates, that you want your nested environment to get, you'll set up something like a pfSense router or a VIOS router, or maybe you have, a physical router, and it'll need to be plugged into this port group, the vBrownBag port group, so that traffic can flow between this 10.0.0.x network and the external world, So you need a bridge or a router to get you out of the nested world. External DNS is the same way. We had some folks that were trying to use this inside a lab. And, Ken was talking before about IT guys making unilateral decisions and blocking everything under the sun And in some cases that's good, in some cases it's just really annoying. But you can plug in a DNS server, a specific DNS server, if your IT team, for instance, blocks all DNS outbound and you must use the internal one. You can put that in here, and that'll give you the ability to resolve names. If you don't put anything in here, it defaults to 8.8.8.8. Remember that big 23 gig download? This is all we select in there, right? So your cloud builder, prefix for the VMs. So this is this 4.5 VLC right here. So if we pop VBB in there for VMware vBrownBag, make it a little V, because I think that's right. That'll just append this onto all of the nested stuff that it creates. Then you've got your password, super secret password there, right? And it's pulling all of this, everything in gray, it pulls out of this JSON file up here on top. So an additional host JSON, remember I said that at bring up or using the expansion pack, you can just create extra nested hosts. So in here we have a sample file. Let's take a look at it real quick because it's pretty simple. And there we go. There it is. And it's back there somewhere. Okay. All right. So here you can see we have 3 nested hosts it's going to create. These are smaller because they're going to be for the workload domain. So you've got 4 CPUs, 32 gig of RAM, right? And then your OS disk, your cache disk, and your capacity drive. IP address, subnet, and gateway, along with the name, right? And the name will actually end up getting this appended onto it when it sets the host name. So they'll actually be esxi-10.vcf.sdvc.lab. When you do this additional host JSON and you have automated selected, it'll actually put everything in the DNS for you as well, right? So all this ESXi 10.11.12.vcf.sdvc.lab will point to 10.0.0.1.10.11.12. It'll all be in there for you. And when you select this, again, in automated mode, you can say, okay, so the first 3 hosts, we can make a workload domain with them. Separate workload domain means we deploy another vCenter, another NSX manager, create a cluster, and put these 3 hosts in it. Or we can create a cluster as part of the management domain, or we can do nothing with it and just commission them, right? So we'll select none and just commission them. Now, down here, we have this do bring up. So that's just gonna execute after it builds all of the nested hosts and imports Cloud Builder. It's going to make an API call, and it's going to throw this JSON at Cloud Builder. And so we'll shut that off for now. But if we do that, then we can't do our hosts, right? So we'll have them be commissioned. And then if we do bring up, we also, if we don't do bring up, rather, we can't deploy an edge cluster or any of these other fun things that we have, right? Like deploying workload management, which is kind of the precursor to Tanzu, but it allows Kubernetes workloads to be deployed on vSphere. And then AVNs or application virtual networks. So if you deploy the edge cluster and then you deploy AVNs, now you have not only an edge cluster, but you have a tier 0 router, a tier 1 router, and a couple of segments. So right away, you're able to route in and out of NSX land, right? And be able to take a look at how that works. So we can go ahead and we can just say deploy all of these things. Now, over on the right-hand side, this is super easy. It's just your environment. Right, and so we can see up here, we're going to connect to 15, and then root and my super secret password. I'm sure nobody can guess. And then we hit connect, and back here, this is kind of important. So if we look, we can kind of see what it's doing. and it's doing some pre-checks, right? So you saw before that we had multiple switches on this, and some of the switches don't fit the bill. So remember when we had to set the switch we created to 9,000, VLC actually checks for 8940 or higher, right? It also checks your port group to see if your security settings are set properly. So a lot of the things that I talked about and warned about are actually validation checks inside here. The 800 gig is another thing. So as soon as we select our port group and we select, this data store here, and we click validate, it's going to go out and it's going to check and kind of make sure that everything that we put is in place. This is an excellent learning moment, everyone. So you see over here, what I've done is I have highlighted this inside of the PowerShell window. That pauses the script. I can't tell you how many times I've sat here staring at this thing because I've got a tiny little like that highlighted or something. So you see how this is doing nothing and we've got a little spinny circle. So go ahead, hit the window and press the escape key, and then magically everything starts working again. I love those learning moments. All right, so as I was saying, validation, so we can see 800 gig or more, 300 gig for expansion. So we got 3.5 terabytes on this drive. We're totally fine, right? So the next step would be to click construct, and it kind of locks everything, right? So you can't make any changes, but if you need to, you can click the back button one time, make whatever changes you want. Like, maybe I do want a gateway in there so that I can get out to the internet at some point. Maybe I want, to create a cluster. So then we click validate again, it goes back out, checks again, and then we can click construct. So let's go ahead and click construct, and then we'll see right away it's found, the OVA file, and it's importing it. We can see the disk progress here, and there's actually multiple windows, right? There's a process window and a logging window. Your errors are going to show up over here in the process window if there are any. Hopefully they're not, right? But if you see red over here, usually it's a bad thing. Not always, but usually it's a bad thing, right? The logging window isn't ever going to show you that, but the logging window moves a lot slower because it only has, pertinent information as to, what you put in and those sort of things, right? So yeah, at this point, we're kind of on our way. This is starting that 16 to 20 minutes to actually import this because it is 23 gig, right? So at this point, let's see what time we got here. There's 1:21 a.m. I don't think that's right. All right, 7:21 p.m. So I've been going for quite a while. We've got our deployment rolling. Heath, do you want to show them what you can do with it? Like, you're the big bang, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let me stop this. And yeah,
Flip over to this one. All right, so this is the do you want fries with that, right? So we just watched Ben deploy a single site, right? So we've got our jump host here. We're able to RDP into it, and he mentioned you can also do this and deploy like a pfSense router or something like that to control it and get into it. But what if you wanted to do multi-site, right, and have a use case of multiple instances of this? If you have a big enough physical ESX or I host to run this on, you can actually go one step further, right, and deploy 2 instances of VLC running on a single host. And so in my lab, that's what I've done. I have my single jump host. I've got 2 instances of Cloud Builder and the VLC that deployed VCF 2 times. And then from there, I went a little step further and deployed HCX. And now I have the ability to run HCX across both sites. So to take that a little further, I made a new script that's available out here. And so I got this publicly available. It's out on GitHub. This script allows you to then automate the deployment of all the HCX components and gets it all the way almost. We're at 95% right now. We're waiting for a couple API updates in a future release of Power CLI. But once that comes out, we'll have this 100% automation that plugs into what Ben has created here with the VLC. I'm going to plug in and say, okay, you can deploy 2 sites of a VLC environment, 2 VCF environments, put this into this script, and it will automatically deploy all of the HCX components and configure all of it for you. So let's walk through. I got a quick demo that I can show you this running. So here on this, I have, close this little window. On the left, we've got a vCenter instance, and you can see the ESXi hosts here are called ESXi1-Hollow-A. On the right here, this is ESXi1-Hollow-B. So I've got 2 completely separate VCF instances, just kind of like we showed in the logical view. In here, I've got the PowerShell script for deploying HCX. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the script here. Just executing the script, the first thing it does, I don't have a fancy GUI like Ben has on the VLC. This one just runs the command line. We're going to grab the HCX inputs. So I got 2 files for this, the PowerShell script and an input file. You should never have to edit anything in the PowerShell script, only the INI file. We grab the INI file, open that up, and it just automatically kicks off the installation of this. So what's going to happen is it's going to initially start deploying the HCX OVA management appliance. And so here on the left, we see the HCX management appliance get deployed. It phones home to VMware, powers on, sets up and activates the license keys for HCX, and then completely configures HCX on this site. Then it's going to repeat the process and deploy the HCX appliance on the right side here. So here we can see the HCX manager getting deployed, and it's going to go through the same process. It's going to phone home to VMware and activate the license keys. It's going to register the vCenter appliances, the NSX components, and then it sets up all the networking configuration components so that this can deploy all the different service appliances for HCX. Once this is done, it goes through the process of actually site pairing everything, which means the 2 HCX managers are then connected to each other and can see each other. And then the next step is to actually create a service mesh. And that's where it starts to build that instance of being able to migrate virtual machines between these 2 sites using HCX. So you can see my script ended with a failure. So what happened here is I have 2 VMware Cloud Foundation instances, and these are both deployed with NSX. And what I'm missing is an API that allows me to select an NSX segment for network extension instead of a distributed switch. And so that's all I'm missing. As soon as Power CLI comes out with the next version, I've got an API for that, and we'll fix this script. So in order to take us past this last step where it automates everything else, we're going to go in and just take a quick tour of the UI and finish the installation of HCX and configure everything. So on the left here, we can see we're at the main dashboard page. Site pairing is complete, and we'll just take a quick look at that. So we've got Hollow-A deployed here, and it's connected to Hollow-B, right? So the 2 sites are connected to each other. We'll go to interconnect, take a look at compute profile. So the compute profile for HCX has been completed and filled out for using the PowerShell script. Then we've got the network profiles. And so network profiles tell how to deploy the service appliances for HCX in each site. So you got to configure, hey, I'm going to deploy the WAN extension appliance, and I need to know what IPs in order to deploy that service appliance for HCX. We're giving it the IP ranges for vMotion and those service appliances here. And that's going to configure the HCX on this site. We can take a quick tour of the other site, that's site 2 here. And same thing, it's site paired. You know, these 2 are connected to each other. So we can see the compute profile is completely configured. We've got network profiles. And so what we need to do to fix this is just jump into the compute profile here. We're going to edit it, and we're going to just go continue all the way to the point where we say, hey, I don't want to use the virtual distributed switch. I want to use the transport zone instead for migrating and extending layer 2 networks. So with NSX installed, we got to use the transport zone for this. So that's all we're going to do. Save this, finish, and we'll jump over to the other side and repeat the process over here for this one, doing the same exact thing. Continue. And there's a lot of clicking.
API call is going to be nice.
It really will be. So this automating this is just, and that's where this script is so cool. There are a ton of clicks to configure HCX. So being able to do this entirely, just type out this, your inputs in an INI file and then just run it across 2 sites. And you can use this not only in this lab, right? You can use this in your production site. So being able to have that API for our customers is going to be so nice. So there we go. We save the 2 compute profiles. They're ready to go. Now we're going to do the service mesh creation. So we'll click create service mesh, continue. We're going to use the compute profile on site A, the compute profile on site B, hit continue. And it's just kind of asking us if we want to make any changes to some of our settings already set. So we're going to grab the uplink. So for the uplink to connect the 2 sites together, we're going to use the management network in both sites for the lab here. Continue, and give it a name. Hit finish. And then this goes through the process of automating the install. And we'll take a look at the inventory here. And so while this installation bar is going across, you can see the HCX service appliances get deployed here in the HCX inventory. And so it did that on both sides. And so now we have a complete HCX service mesh deployed, and we'll just expand side A here. And we can see now we have migration capabilities ready to go, right? So this thing is ready to do migrations. And so if I jump out to the actual live lab where I recorded that quick demo, because that normally would take a little while. Let's see. Yeah, let's do this. Save this window back up. Here's the lab over here. There it is. All right. So here's the lab where we recorded that. And so I actually extended a network. So if we take a look at, this is the hollow A side. And then I have extended a tiny segment, right? So I created a segment inside NSX inside this lab. And then if we go look at some of the inventory here inside this site, we can see this is the hollow A site. I've got 2 tiny virtual machines that we can then migrate over to the B side within this environment. So let's jump over to HCX, and I haven't even fully tested this yet, so we'll do it live.
Live demo. That's what it's all about.
That's right. And hope that this works. We're going to migrate and grab tiny VM1, add it to the list here. And then we got to say, all right, where are we going to migrate it to? So we'll say we're going to migrate it. We're on A right now. We're going to go over to ESXi1 hollow B. Grab the storage on that side. We're going to use vSAN storage. And we'll do a vMotion. Validate it. And it's going to overcommit the data store, which we fully expect inside of a nested lab environment. And we'll start the migration. So Ken, what do you think of being able to deploy HCX and actually do migrations inside of 2 sites on a single ESXi host, physical host inside your lab environment?
I'm actually excited about it. I think it's something that I can use personally in my job as a VMware partner to kind of show some use cases off to the customers. I want to make sure I understand something though. So we've got 2 nested VCF environments that are communicating with each other. You know, they've got routing enabled, which is enabling us to use HCX to do things like extend layer 2 segments or do migrations. Did you say that you've set it up so that it's automated to the point where I don't have to worry about creating that routing, or do I have to create the routing between the 2 nested VCF environments for this to work?
So you have to deploy this router here, right?
Okay.
In the environment. to have these two kind of tenants be inside the lab, right?
Okay.
And configuring the VLC deployment within the lab, we provide a guide to actually make sure that you can deploy two VLANs like this.
So
but
this
you
would
can
be that PF Sense router that Ben was talking about earlier.
Yeah,
You could
exactly.
optionally deploy. Okay,
Yep.
cool. And not related, but I'm curious, what is it you were using there where you had browser windows within your browser window to show off everything you were doing between the two different networks?
That's a beautiful piece of proprietary software we use to record
Ah,
demos at VMware. And so we call that iSim. That's our iSim simulator. So it can just helps us be able to speed up demo creation and display for those long running processes, right? So
nice.
that little demo of deploying HCX, it could take, I don't know, roughly 30 to 45 minutes, but I can click through it and you get to see the same feeling of it across
Gotcha. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So with that, let's see. I think this migration should be kicking off. Yeah, it's still trying to calculate it here. Yeah, it's going through the process. So this could take a little while. But that gives you a good idea of this thing's going to take tiny VM from site 1 over to site 2 and be able to move VMs, vMotion live, right? You can test all the different HCX components here inside of the VLC lab that we've got with Ben's lab constructor. So this is kind of that ultimate use case of what do you want to do with this lab environment? You can a lot of stuff, right?
Whatever you want.
Yeah.
Right.
So with that, I'll pass it back to Ben.
Okay. Let's real quick just go check on our lab. I know we're kind of over time, right? So here we can see all of the VBB, the vBrownBag Cloud Builder got deployed, right? We were kind of watching that. Now it's started up. We've got 7 hosts that are deployed. It's going through the kickstart script now, and it's configuring and continuing to deploy all of those. Then kind of the next step for VLC is it will inject that JSON file into the API on Cloud Builder. And then, you know, Bob's your mother's brother, as they say, and you'll go ahead and end up with an SDDC fully configured in just a little while. Okay,
And so I learned 2 important things already tonight. One, make sure that I'm not highlighting anything in the PowerShell window. That would not be in the deployment guide most likely. And B, Bob's your mother's brother. That's a good one. I had not heard that before. So I learned at least 2 things tonight. So thank you for that.
I'm glad it was those 2 and not the what IT people are all about. One. Okay, so couple of things, right? Licenses is always a big question. Ken brought up the expert licensing. We also got VMUG licensing, right? The VMUG Advantage program will give you everything that you need as far as licensing to do this, right? And we actually have a discount code, which, you know, Heath pinged the people and got it reactivated today. So it's 10% off for a year subscription. So it's like what, $180 then, something like that for, you know, all the licensing you need to do anything, right? And even more. So I did talk about the step-by-step labs that we have, right? My director, Jim Seneca, he's got this up on his GitHub. So everything from, you know, doing zero trust, SDN, building out networks both manually and then automated, kind of that step by step, so that you crawl, walk, run, and kind of learn as you're building the labs. And at the end, right, you actually have a shopping cart app set up and running, and you can test different things to see how you can break it. But it's great that it's built for the labs, all the default part. Now, how do I get this? Where do I go? This is that information, right? So the tiny.cc stuff, you know, that's always updated for Git VLC. It'll be the latest one. I didn't even know that Jason animated that GIF. I did not even know that.
Yeah, I did that a while ago.
Oh, you did it. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So anyways, yeah, the VLC Slack, there's 1,600 people over there now. Right. So get over there, ask questions. Occasionally we have giveaways, right? You can see like I got pillows behind me and I got face masks and I got like can koozies and stuff. Not that anybody's going to want those in the middle of winter, but maybe next summer you'll want them. And thank you very much for sticking with us for this long and listening to it. I'm not sure, are we coming back? Are we going to do some more, you think, Ken?
Do you want to? Because you're always welcome back.
I feel like
can
we're
work with your
not
schedule.
finished. Like we haven't seen all the things. So
Well,
yeah,
then we should see more things. Why don't I get with you and reschedule? I think we got something scheduled for next week. And I think 2 weeks from now, well, I'll tell you what, let's not record us figuring out schedules because that's just going to bore the viewers.
I agree.
Let's connect afterwards and figure that out. And we will see you back for another follow-up session for more VLC goodness. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Maybe by that time I'll have my work lab in a state where you can kind of guide me through this. Like I'm the newbie and I'm amazed by the time the recording's done at how easy it was to get everything set up or something like that.
That'd be fantastic.
Absolutely.
No promises though, guys, but maybe I'll be ready for it by that time.
No pressure. No pressure.
All right,
You can
cool.
do it.
Sure can. Yeah. I'm just going to pause for just a moment. We have a few, notes in the Q&A, like great session. Thank you. Very informative. If there are any questions, now's your chance to get them out there. If not, we will end the recording here and say good night to everybody. So, if you have a question, type it now or just type wait and exclamation point, and I'll wait for you to get the whole question in the chat. And I'm waiting and I'm not seeing them. I'm not even seeing a ... So I'm going to say we're good. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Heath. Appreciate both of you joining us tonight. And we'll see you the next time, whenever that is. I'm going to hit stop
Awesome.
recording.